That would destroy her reputation and turn her own show into a battlefield she could never win. The morning started like any other at the ITV studios. Lorraine Kelly sat in her bright yellow chair, her fake smile plastered across her face as she prepared to interview Rowan Atkinson, the man behind Mr. Bean, Johnny English. And Blackadder was here to talk about his latest project. Simple enough, right? Wrong. From the moment Rowan walked onto that set, something felt different. The usual warmth that guests received was nowhere to be found. Lorraine looked at him like he was a circus act she had to tolerate. Right then, she said, not even standing. Rowan Atkinson, everyone. The man who made a career out of not talking. The audience laughed nervously. Rowan smiled politely, but you could see a flicker across his face. A tiny crack in his usual calm demeanor. Thank you for having me, Lorraine, he said, measured and professional. Oh, we had to really, she replied with a bark of laughter. Your people have been calling us for weeks. Desperate to get you on, weren't they? Rowan's eyebrows rose, but he maintained composure. Well, I do have a new film coming out, so naturally we thought your viewers might be interested. Lorraine flipped through her notes with exaggerated boredom. Though I have to ask, forgive me for being blunt, but don't you think you're getting a bit old for all this physical comedy nonsense? I mean, you're not exactly a spring chicken anymore. The studio fell silent. Even the cameraman looked uncomfortable. This wasn't playful banter. This was an attack disguised as a question. Rowan sat back, jaw tightening slightly. I'm sorry. Could you repeat that? Oh, come on. Don't play dumb with me. Lorraine leaned forward, predator-like. You're 68. Isn't it time to hang up the rubber faces and silly walks? Leave it to the young people. Rowan's voice remained calm, but an edge crept in. I wasn't aware there was an age limit on entertaining people. Officially, no, Lorraine said mockingly. But isn't it sad watching an old man try to be funny? Like watching your grandfather trying to be hip. Embarrassing for everyone. The audience gasped. This was live television, and their host had crossed a line. But Lorraine wasn't done. Let's be honest, she continued, clearly enjoying herself. Mr. Bean was what, 30 years ago? And it wasn't exactly Shakespeare, was it? A grown man acting like a toddler. What does that say about British comedy standards? Rowan clasped his hands, knuckles turning white, but voice steady. Mr. Bean has brought joy to millions worldwide. Children, adults, families. I'm rather proud of that. Lorraine pressed on, sensing weakness. Are you though? Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like a man clinging to relevance. When was the last time you did something genuine? The studio seemed to freeze. Crew members exchanged disbelief. This was no longer an interview. It was character assassination. Rowan's hands remained clasped, but his composure was cracking. I came here to talk about my new project, not to be psychoanalyzed by someone who thinks morning television makes them qualified to judge artistic merit, he said quietly, though his voice carried the weight of years in comedy and life. Oh, artistic merit, Lorraine laughed, slapping her knee dramatically. Listen to him, everyone. Artistic merit from the man who built his career on pulling faces and falling over. She turned to the audience, encouraging them to laugh along with her mockery. But the audience sat in stunned silence. They hadn't come to watch their childhood hero get torn apart by a bitter host. You know what I think? Lorraine continued, venom in her voice. You're jealous. Jealous of real comedians. People like Jimmy Carr, Sarah Millican, people with actual wit and intelligence who don't resort to playground antics to get a laugh. Rowan's left eye twitched slightly. His breathing changed, yet his voice remained measured. Those are fine comedians, he said tightly. But comedy isn't a competition, Lorraine. There's room for different styles, different approaches. Is there, though? She shot back. Because it seems to me your style went out with the arc. Physical comedy is dead. Dead and buried. Accept it, and step aside for people with actual talent. That was the moment everything changed. Rowan Atkinson, a man who had made the world laugh for 40 years, who had brought happiness to countless lives, who had never publicly insulted anyone, had finally had enough. He sat forward, eyes locked on Lorraine's face. Talent, he said slowly. You want to talk about talent, do you? Lorraine sensed she had pushed too far, but it was too late to back down. Yes, let's talk about talent then, Rowan said, standing. The studio lights seemed to dim as he rose, towering over the woman, who thought she could destroy him with cheap shots and playground insults. Lorraine Kelly, for the first time in the interview, looked genuinely nervous. "Sit down, Rowan," she said, trying to regain control. "We're in the middle of an interview." "No," he replied, voice cutting through the silence like a blade. "We're in the middle of an ambush, and I'm done being your victim." Turning to face the audience, back to Lorraine, he spoke with authority that made everyone lean in. "Ladies and gentlemen, I've been in show business over 4 decades, worked with Brill." The audience went dead silent. At least when he pulled a face or fell, he was creating joy. What does she create? Cynicism, smallness, mediocrity. Rowan began pacing, hands animated. "Do you know what Mr. Bean has done for this world?" Letters from parents telling me their autistic children spoke there. First words while watching. Bean. Soldiers saying my films helped them survive their darkest days. Children in hospitals forgetting pain for an hour. All that, just playground antics to you. Do you see how small that makes you? Rowan's voice dropped to a quiet, devastating tone, carrying the weight of every year he had spent bringing laughter to the world. "Lorraine, it's not an old man trying to make people laugh. It's someone bitter, threatened by joy, trying to destroy it wherever they see it. Someone so insecure about their own lack of substance that they attack anyone who actually brings something meaningful to the world." Lorraine finally found her voice, shaky and defensive. "I was just asking questions." "No," Rowan said, stepping closer, eyes locked on hers. "You were trying to humiliate me on live television. You thought you could take down Rowan Atkinson because you assumed I'd just sit quietly. You thought wrong." He leaned forward, hands resting on her desk, radiating dignity and power. "Let me tell you about comedy," he continued. "Real comedy comes from truth. It comes from understanding people, seeing their struggles and joys, and reflecting them in a way that helps them cope. Physical comedy, the kind you mock so easily, is the purest form there is. It crosses languages, cultures, generations. A child in Japan and a grandmother in Scotland can watch the same pratfall, and both burst into laughter. That is miraculous." The audience began murmuring their agreement. They could feel the shift. The victim was becoming the victor. "But what you do here," Rowan said, gesturing to the studio, "is feeding your own ego, making yourself feel important by making others feel small. Pathetic." Lorraine tried to interrupt, but he didn't allow it. "You called my work playground antics. Well, maybe the world needs more playground joy and less boardroom cruelty. More people willing to look foolish to make others smile. And fewer like you, tearing others down to feel smart." He turned to the audience again, voice growing stronger. "I've been called many things, silly, childish, simple, and I wear those labels proudly. Because if being silly brings happiness to millions, I'll be silly forever. If being childish reminds us to find wonder in the world, I'll stay childish. If being simple means I don't need to hurt others to feel good, then simple is exactly what I want to be." The audience erupted in genuine applause, heartfelt and unprompted. Lorraine sat froze. Rowan leaned slightly closer, but now there was no anger, only disappointment. "You don't just belittle me. You belittle humanity. And that," he said, standing beside his chair, dignified and strong, "is far more damaging than any pratfall I've ever taken." The cameras captured every nuance, every gesture emphasizing his words. Physical comedy, he reminded them, wasn't about laughing at someone. It was about connecting, teaching resilience, celebrating difference. "Art isn't tearing others down to feel taller," Rowan said, voice steady again. "Joy isn't measured by how small you make someone feel. Understanding, compassion, kindness, these are true talent. And Lorraine, you've just learned that the hard way." Rowan straightened his jacket and looked directly into the main camera, speaking not just to Lorraine, but to everyone watching, to anyone creating, performing, or sharing their art. "Don't let people like this discourage you. The world needs your humor, your creativity, your ability to make it brighter. Never let bitterness convince you that joy is less valuable than criticism." Then, with a warmth that reminded everyone why they had fallen in love with his work decades ago, Rowan smiled genuinely. "Thank you all for listening. And thank you, Lorraine, for reminding me why I do what I do. Sometimes, meeting someone who has forgotten joy reminds us of its true value." He turned toward the exit, but paused, looking back one last time. "Oh, and Lorraine," he said, voice calm, measured, yet piercingly clear. Next time you interview someone about their life's work, perhaps watch it first. You'd be amazed how much you can learn when you approach it with an open mind instead of a closed heart. The door clicked softly behind him, like the final note of a symphony, leaving the studio in stunned silence. The audience erupted into applause louder than any morning show had ever heard. Tears, smiles, and standing ovations reflected the weight of the words they had just witnessed. Some wept quietly, touched by the dignity and humanity Rowan had displayed. Others cheered, inspired by a man who had turned verbal assault into a masterclass of integrity. Lorraine Kelly sat frozen, her perfect morning show makeup smudged. Bright yellow chair now a symbol of vulnerability and failure. She had tried to dominate, humiliate, and belittle someone the world admired, and had been outclassed completely. Her show, once a controlled stage, had become a witness to a lesson in grace, resilience, and the power of kindness. Rowan didn't need to pull a single face, stumble, or fall. Every gesture, every word carried the weight of decades of dedication to making people laugh, to connecting with humanity at its purest. Physical comedy had become invisible in its profoundness, but its impact was undeniable. It healed, it inspired. It reminded people of what it meant to be joyful in a cruel, fast-paced world. The producers likely panicked, but the truth in that room was undeniable. Rowan Atkinson had turned what was meant to humiliate him into a showcase of why his work mattered. More than ever, Lorraine had set out to destroy, but she had been shown that real talent doesn't need to fight. It radiates, persists, and uplifts. And somewhere in the silence after the clapping, the whispers, and the astonishment, the moral remained crystal clear: joy, integrity, and human connection are far stronger than bitterness, cynicism, and cruelty. Rowan's performance that morning. The cameras finally cut to commercial, leaving Lorraine Kelly alone with the consequences of her cruelty. And the world reminded once again why Rowan Atkinson remains a legend of laughter, kindness, and humanity.